Air presented by the Harvey B. Gantt Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm Dexter Wimberly, and I'm happy to be here. We have a fantastic guest today. YoYo Lander is a Los Angeles-based artist whose work explores the complexity of the human body, exploring its beauty, strength, and vulnerability through intricately crafted collages. Her art is a dynamic meditation on movement and form, wherein she captures the subtle details of posture and expression with a keen sense of observation. Lander's signature technique combines layers of hand-cut stained watercolor paper on top of stained watercolor backgrounds, creating rich textural bodyscapes that convey both emotional depth and visual energy. The result is a striking series of multi-hued compositions that evoke a profound sense of presence and resilience. Through her evocative and layered approach to collage, she creates a compelling dialogue about identity, the body, and the human experience, captivating viewers worldwide with her distinctive visual language. Lander's work is in prestigious public collections, including the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, the International African American Museum in Charleston, South Carolina, the Artistic Museum of Contemporary Art in Wales, the California African American Museum, among others. Her work is also held in major private collections, including Beth DeWitty's The Bunker Art Space in West Palm Beach, Florida, and the Petrucci Family Foundation in Asbury, New Jersey. Lander's mid-career survey, YoYo Lander, Between the Quiet Selected Works from 2019 to 2024, is on view at the Harvey B. Gantt Center through May 11th of this year. Without further ado, let's welcome YoYo Lander to today's open air. How are
Hi,
you?
I'm good. And yourself?
I'm good, good. I'm glad that we have this opportunity to talk. And it's actually one of my favorite scenarios because we've never had a conversation prior to today. Um, and that is intentional because I wanted to, ask you a bunch of questions in advance. And then I thought, well, it would be a lot more interesting if, we were talking for the first time in real time. So hope you're doing well today.
I am, and I'm very excited too.
Great, great. Well, let's get right into it. I obviously just read your bio, and that provided quite a bit of information about your sort of like thinking behind your work, I would say. But I'm certain that that's not how you introduce yourself at cocktail parties. So I'd love to kind of hear from you directly. How do you introduce yourself in terms of describing the work that you do?
Yeah, so pretty much I have this obsession with humanity. I think we are all so beautifully unique. It's funny because every now and then I have these moments where I'm in a crowded space and I look around and I just get kind of emotional about how different and unique everyone is. And I am just really fascinated with how people exist in their bodies, like how they show up. And so that's something that I'm always aiming to capture through my art. Um, I guess I became pretty much interested in body language around the age of 7 when my father, he was in a really bad car accident. He became paraplegic. And for a while, he couldn't speak. And so I just remember studying his eyes a lot
Hmm.
and seeing, how he felt through his eyes and seeing how similar his eyes were to his brothers, his 3 other brothers and his sisters, and just very much noticing those little nuances because he was a paraplegic, he couldn't walk anymore, so I had this one dad who was this vibrant person who could fix anything, who was very strong and athletic, and then after his accident, he was sort of reduced to a wheelchair for the rest of his life. And so that also played a part into my curiosity when it comes down to just the body. And also how my dad, even though he had a different body, his spirit remained the same. He was still this very jovial, happy person. And that never changed, but his body did. So I think, and of course, at the time at 7, I wasn't thinking about these things. But as I started to create artwork and I started to become drawn to the body, and to the skin tones and just posture, I started to think really hard about, well, where did this come from? and
Hmm.
and that's what I figured out. But also I figured out something else. I was doing an artist talk in Houston at the Museum of Fine Art, and someone asked a similar question, like, well, what inspired you to create the way you create? And no one ever asked me that. And on stage, it dawned on me, like, The Very Hungry Caterpillar was one of my first introductions into with, like, watercolor, this idea of watercolor and collage. And I think in my subconscious somewhere, it just lived there until I thought about it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, watercolor is a very interesting medium to me because, as far as my understanding of the process of painting with watercolor, I'm not a painter, of course. I've worked with hundreds of them, but um, it's far less forgiving than other media because there is a lot of room for correction in terms of painting with watercolor, which I also find to be completely fascinating. But just kind of getting back to what you were talking about, so that moment in your life when your father had that accident and you were around 7, obviously that was a catalytic moment, changed the way you saw the world, even at such a young age. But when did you start moving toward creating art? Like, obviously, many people will point to their childhood and say, well, I've been drawing since I was a child. I mean, that's a pretty common thing, and it's probably true for you too. But when did you start thinking about art as a career?
That would probably be around 2014. I was doing all kinds of things. Like, I was having parties and just trying to figure out how I wanted to express myself. I was, directing plays, and really I was doing everything but art. I kind of abandoned it for a long time because I had done it so much all my life that I never really saw anyone make like I never really saw anyone in my own personal circle or anyone I knew um, be successful at it. And so it just kind of was an afterthought. But I remember I painted a mural in my kitchen. I just got up one morning, it was like 3 a.m., and I decided I wanted to paint this mural. So I painted this mural in my kitchen for whatever reason. I don't even know where the paint came from. And I took a photograph of it, and I was really proud of it. And so a few weeks later, a friend of mine, his name is Clint, and he was visiting from Australia, and we were sitting around just talking. And he said, I really would like a painting of Martin Luther King because we have the same birthday. I really want it from my office. And I thought, okay, what are you telling me that for? And he was like, well, remember that mural that you showed me in your kitchen? And I'm just thinking, yeah. He was like, well, do you think you could paint it for me? But my MLK? And I just thought, yeah, right. So I actually put it off for like maybe a year until he kept
Mm,
asking me about it. And then so finally I just locked myself in my little apartment at the time. And I think it took me about 4 weeks to do this large painting of MLK. I thought really hard about the materials I wanted to use. And back then I was painting with acrylic and I thought about the style and everything. It looks nothing like the style I do now. But I felt so when I did that, I felt so like fulfilled. I
mm.
felt like I could do this forever. I don't want anyone to ever be around me. I could be a recluse and just do artwork for the rest of my life. And I just really enjoyed the experience. And it reminded me of like what I used to do when I was in school, bored, lonely, scared, just draw. And so I didn't know if he would like it. I sent a picture of it and he said he liked it and he actually paid me, I wasn't even expecting that. And then I thought, I'm going to go for this. And if it's for me, it's going to work out, and if it's not for me, then I'll just keep on my journey of figuring it out. And it turned out pretty well, I would say. So that's kind of where it all started, where I decided I'm gonna go for this. And that was back in about
Yeah.
2014, 2015, yeah.
Well, quite a lot has happened for you in the last decade, and I want to get to that, in more detail a little bit later in our conversation, just in terms of how your career has evolved and some of the sort of key moments in that journey. But kind of going back to the subject matter of your work for a moment. Obviously, if someone commissions a work, you didn't realize you were being commissioned to do a work because you didn't realize you were going to get paid. But if someone commissions a work for a specific subject matter, whether it's you or any other artist, it's the person that's commissioning the work that generally will ask for some specificity around like subject matter and other things. And sometimes they ask for too much specificity, actually. But nevertheless, I'm sure the lion's share of your work, probably 95% or more of the work that you make, are decisions that you're making yourself in terms of the subject matter and like who you want
Correct.
to paint or what kind of like collage you want to create. So, like, how do you go about choosing the individual you, you depicted in your work?
So it broke up a little bit, but I think you asked, how do I go about choosing my subjects?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. It's like this visceral feeling. Sometimes I come up with an idea first, and sometimes I feel very attracted to the way a person exists in their body, and I ask them, "Hey, would you like to pose for me? This is what I'm thinking about." But usually, I'll have a loose idea, always around vulnerability reflection. That's like the main subject, and then everything else is always around that. So sometimes it's just the way a person looks, and I just feel like they would look really beautiful in this painting, this piece. And then sometimes there's a specific idea that I want to capture. Like in my series, A
Hmm.
Big Romance, there was a specific type of woman that I needed. And I've met this girl at a party. And then another girl, I just happened to see her online and I thought, wow, I think she would be great for this. And then I just ask, and most people are really open to being photographed and to having their portrait created. So that's usually the process. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think in this day and age, because we, meaning, sort of talking about everybody, and certainly in the U.S. and other developed nations, we spend so much time looking at media, looking at reflections of ourselves or of other people through media, and so I think probably now more than ever, there's a comfort level that people probably have about being asked if they want to be photographed or painted or depicted. And in fact, for a lot of people, it's a goal.
Oh,
I'd
yeah.
imagine, right? I'd imagine, in the distant past, there was a lot more hesitation about such things, or it was revered and treated as something far more unique and special than it is today in terms of someone walking up to someone and saying, "I'd love to paint you." um, that could elicit so many different kind of reactions depending upon the situation, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But in terms of like the your approach, I mean, certainly, having looked at some of your more recent work, I'm curious about your influences. I mean, you've been at this professionally, sort of very driven for the past decade. But I imagine if you go back, there are some artists that have influenced you, or maybe even continue to influence you. And I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, I honestly I am influenced by so much. Like, sometimes I really think I should start writing these things down. Like, sometimes it's a song or just a person in my life, certain people that I listen to on YouTube. Everybody, I'm just inspired. I take it all. I'm like a sponge. I take it all in. I have this notebook that I carry around, and I'm just writing down ideas everywhere I go. So when people ask me that question, it's always like, because it's like I have to remember everyone. But I would say that off the top of my head, who's lately like my biggest influence? That's another artist.
Well, it's
Hmm.
well, it's okay. I mean, I think that you answered the question to the extent that you're sort of omnivorous in that way. I mean, maybe that's a good word.
Yeah.
Um, to kind of share a bit more from my perspective. I mean, as a curator, obviously I look at a lot of art, like probably an unhealthy amount of art. um, but at the same time, my biggest influences in terms of the work that I do actually isn't art. It's
Yeah.
actually music, movies, and books. So I don't really, and obviously because I'm not an artist, it's a different kind of
Right.
perspective. But I only point that out to say that I can totally relate to the idea of one being influenced by things outside of the medium
Mhm.
that they're necessarily working in. If I watch
Yeah.
a really good movie, um, then I'll probably watch it 10 times over the course of like a couple of years. If Because anything to me that's really good is worth, if it's worth doing once, it's worth doing twice. Right. So, and then from those experiences, I actually get inspired with ideas and concepts, and not necessarily literal concepts, but things that sort of like push a little sort of thought seed into my mind that might take a year, if not more, to actually develop into an idea for a show or an idea for something. So I totally get that, right? And I also think that from an artistic perspective, one can look at your work or any other artist's work and try to draw conclusions in terms of, oh, I can see a little bit of this in this work, or I can see a little bit of that in this work. And I think that's like common, right? Like that's just the way it is, because we are all sort of like, influenced by all of these things. So
Right.
something I also wanted to ask you about, I mean, being a self-taught artist, right? Which I also think is an interesting terminology, right?
Mhm.
Um, because in many ways, like all artists are also self-taught. In addition to their education, there's like has to be some self-teaching. But
Right.
how has that how has that affected the way you navigate the art world? Both, are there some good anecdotes, some challenges? I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, so, I don't think that I've encountered any challenges, being a self-taught artist, but if I have, I haven't noticed them because that's kinda how I live my life. A lot of things just kinda fly over my head. So, but I think that it's actually been a good thing because I am a curious person in
Right,
general. If
right,
I wanna figure out something or some material that I don't understand, I'm gonna go on this massive, like, hunt to figure it out, and I think that's the part about my practice that I find the most exciting because I don't want to stick to the same thing all the time. Like I have work that I'm creating that I haven't even put out yet, you know,
Mhm.
and not because I'm afraid to, but it's because I haven't mastered it yet. And the thing that excites me the most is that I haven't mastered it yet. It's things
Mhm.
that I'm ideas that I'm still fleshing out, abstract ideas that I can't express in the figurative, like, okay, how am I going to express this in the abstract? These are all things that are exciting. And for me, I feel like if I went to like I'm not going to say the name of any school, but if I went to like a really prestigious like art school or got this like really prestigious teaching, I don't know. I think I might be a little refined to what I was taught instead of open to just explore. Because I encountered that in high school, I wanted to be an architect. And I
Mm.
took this class and I remember really being excited about being an architect. I knew I was going to be an architect. And then I had this class where it just totally just drained the air out of my balloon. And I left that class feeling like this is not for me. And I thought about it like, well, what was it? And I think it was just like the way I was taught. I think for me, I need to learn by experience. That's not always good in everything, but for
Right.
art, I need to learn by experience. I need to go out, seek things, feel them, touch them, speak to other artists, talk, have have like a day or two to really talk to other artists and figure out what they're interested in, what type of materials they're using, because everyone is doing so much and everyone's mind is on so many things, and that's what excites me. And I think
Yeah.
it's been a yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a whole another conversation we could have about the value of a sort of traditional artistic education and what it can bring. I'm not an expert in that space, so I only have my opinions, and so I have had conversations with educators and conversations with artists about this subject, and I've heard both sides of it
Yeah.
quite extensively. But in the end, I'm just left with my own opinions on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that everything you've just expressed makes complete sense, and I think that one of the benefits of a more traditional path is that you end up meeting certain kinds of people. But at the
Yeah.
same time, that's not the end all because there are a lot of fantastic artists out there that have very prestigious educations that have had a
Yeah.
very, very difficult time, shaping a career for themselves, right? So it's
Yeah.
obvious. It's obvious that it's not a simple equation, right? It's not a simple equation. I mean, MFA programs across America churn out thousands of creative individuals every year. Um, a small fraction of those individuals go on to have what one would consider like a commercially successful career, and that may not be their goal. So that's sort of like a whole nother thing too, right? Just because someone gets a formal arts education doesn't necessarily mean that they want to be the next fill in the blank artist, right? There's sometimes it's just about a certain kind of fulfillment that one wants. But the reason I'm talking about this with you, this aspect, so like in such detail, is because I know for a fact that there are many individuals out there who are in the creative field who who are sort of discouraged, so to speak, because they don't have a formal art education, and they're
Mhm.
thinking maybe limiting themselves in terms of what's possible for them.
Yeah.
And there is evidence, you are evidence, right? But there's plenty of evidence that if one is focused and talented and has the energy and the wherewithal, there is a path, right? There is a
Yeah.
path, right?
Absolutely.
So let's talk about your path, right?
Mhm.
So obviously, so you painted a mural in your kitchen over a decade ago,
Yeah.
and and now you're showing in international galleries.
Yeah.
So big difference. Can you talk about can you talk about one or two moments in this
Mhm.
journey that were turning points for you?
Yeah. Um, well, most recently, of course, the exhibition at the Gantt. It's first of all, I've said this time and time again, it was amazing working with the Gantt. It's like they were in my head. Every color I thought about, every the font, everything, they just knew, and it was just a pleasure working with everyone, and I'm so thankful. And to walk into that beautiful space in the middle of downtown Charlotte with all my family there, and to see my work so beautifully displayed, and the words behind all of the what
Hmm.
I'm drawing a blank. It was fantastic, and we just had a little meeting about what the artwork was about, and it was wonderful because whenever I don't have to say much about my work and people get it, I finally feel like I've done something right. And that's
Yeah.
what they did, and that was really that's been a turning point. And also, I think in 2020 when you know how it was in 2020.
Yes,
I
I
mean,
do.
it was like everyone was just looking for this outlet, and everyone was just trying to figure out, like, what to say, and a lot of people gravitated towards my art, and I just thought that was so beautiful, and the things that people have been writing every day. I get some sort of message through my website about what this piece meant to them. They saw this piece there. I've been navigating this. Just the other day, this guy, he sent me a message saying that he'd been thinking about deep water and drowning are not the same thing, and he had been talking about navigating, dealing with his father's cancer diagnosis and his transgender son issues with his in his first year of college, and how that's been just something he's never had to deal with before. And he said, I kept going back to your piece and the pose and the name of it. And it was just really those that all of that is just so touching to me, that something that was in my head and something that I felt is touching other people.
Right.
That means something. And I just think that in 100 years there's going to be this curator that I hope comes across my work, and I hope they can get a sense of who we are, and how we spent our leisure time, and the things that, made us sad, and the things that made us happy, and the things that we were reflecting on, and I just hope that the beautiful people that I've encountered along my journey, their stories can also be a part of art history, because we're here and it's real and it's true. And it's my reality and the reality of other people around me, and I often don't see that in a lot of work that I feel like is put in the forefront. And so whenever I see someone have this, like, serious, um, just appreciation of my work, it just makes me feel like nothing else really matters. And yeah, that's my answer. Like, those things have been wonderful for me. Like, it's the currency that I need, to keep going.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. I get that. Thank you for sharing that. So let's switch gears a little bit. So what's a typical studio day like for you? Like what how do you get yourself set up in the studio? Is it like what kind of music are you listening to? What's the vibe? Like do you need a certain mood to make work? Like can we talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I need daylight. I need daylight, and LA daylight is great daylight. It's very cinematic. I like to work with no lights on, so I need all the windows open and the blinds open. Um, I feel like I see clearer. I have this rule where I don't touch artwork unless I feel 100% ready to, and that's usually most of the time. But there are days when I get off my track, or I get off track, and I get a phone call or I have to handle something, and I don't want to touch any art, because I know that whenever I rush, or if I touch the work and I'm not fully there, I'm gonna mess it up. So
Hmm.
that's something that I stick to. Um, but
Yeah.
I usually start around 10 AM, 9, 10 AM, and then I finish around 5, 4 or 5, just so I can make sure I get all the daylight. But I mean, I love being in my studio. I'm able to break down a piece and see how long it's going to take me to do. So if it's going to take me a week and a half, I know that I need to do the hair first and then some shoulders. And so I just sort of break it up and I just try to take my time, because I notice that whenever I take my time, I like the way the piece turns out. So
Yeah,
um, that's pretty much it. The vibe is just quiet. I can't have a whole bunch of noise in the background. I'll listen to a little jazz or sometimes an audiobook, something that I want to get through. But that's pretty much it. Actually, it's funny. Audiobooks, I can only get through them when I'm in my studio. Like if I'm just like kind of sitting on the couch, chilling, I'm gonna fall asleep. I'm not gonna listen to the audiobook, but when I'm working, I guess when I'm tangibly doing something, I'm able to retain the information. So it's pretty boring, but that's just it. Like there's no special candles and this and that. I think everyone thinks that, oh, that's how I have to paint. I have to have, some wine here, this, that. It's like it's not that serious, but but it's just pretty basic. That's
yeah,
it.
yeah. I mean, I could relate, um, and without going off on a tangent, but I can totally relate. And having your creative space, having it, the vibe that you need is incredibly important. It's like hard for me to even overstate it. And I'm glad that you shared that. And so I do have some questions about LA, considering everything that has happened in the past month or so. But what I want to do now, we have some images of your work, and when we're done with the images, I'll sort of follow up with the line of questioning I was about to go into. But I think this is a
Okay.
great opportunity to look at some of your works, and you can kind of walk us through. So this is always the fun part for these
Yeah.
presentations. So yeah, let's start here. And what I would like you to do, just take a minute or two and just talk about the work in as much detail as you care to share.
Yeah, so this was part of my 2020 series. It was called Time Off. I think I started creating the work in 2019. This was actually a really special series to me. I did 8 of them. And my idea was it was inspired by my mother. Whenever we were on Sundays, we just knew, me and my sister, that we knew that my mom kind of needed her own time to just be alone and away from us and my dad. And so we she always just went into her room, and there was this white door that her room the door was white. And we just knew she needed her time off because she was a secretary and she worked all week. And of course, she had to take care of us, and then she had to take care of the things that were going on with my father. And so we just knew she just needed a break. And we never talked about
Mm,
it. And it was just something that was unspoken. And so we would like help my dad with his rehabilitation. We would watch TV with him. Um, but and I never knew what she was doing in that room, but I always wondered. And so when I started thinking about time off and I started thinking about my own life and how I wanted to present myself as an artist to the world, I just started thinking about my own story. And of course, as I became a woman and got older, I knew what she was doing in that room. I knew she was probably, like writing down bills and figuring out how to pay this and that, or she was probably crying, she was probably praying, she was probably doing a lot of different things. And I wanted to depict women that are perceived to be strong in very vulnerable positions. And I wanted to cover their hair
hmm
because I feel like sometimes hair can be a very big distraction. So I definitely
right.
wanted to cover their, but I wanted to make them very beautiful. And the reason why I love watercolor is because there is this movement that I love. I have this obsession with tie-dye. I've always had this obsession with tie-dye, and the watercolor was like the closest way I could get to it, I guess, in art. And working with watercolor, it's always fun to see what you're going to get after you walk away from it because it can be very unforgiving. But that's also what I love about the process is that you have this idea that you want, but then you walk away from it and you have to surrender. And whatever I get the next day, I'm going to have to use it. Um, So that's the deeper longing is greater than discomfort. And it's just really a piece about like wanting something, um, and just knowing that you might have to be a little uncomfortable before you get it. And
Wow,
it's one of my favorite pieces.
that's
Yeah.
great. That's great. Wow. Let's go to the next work.
Okay. Oh, this one is languishing. I got this idea. I love to figure out the names of the pieces sometimes before I actually create the pieces. That doesn't always happen. And with this series, this was a part of a series called Onto Something. And this was probably the first one I wanted to create. Either it was the first one or two, but basically, I had learned that a group of psychologists got together uh, in 2021, and they decided they wanted to source a word for how the American people felt in 2020. And the word they came up with was languishing, which is like being in a state of stagnation. And I thought, I want to create. What does languishing look like in the body? And this is what we came up with. So I found this girl, woman, actually, I shouldn't say girl, this woman, lovely. And I wanted, again, the hair to be, it can be so distracting. So I wanted to find someone with a beautiful bald head. And I wanted her to create a sense of conversation just through her body language. And we came up with 9 different portraits with different sayings that mean different things. And I just think that it was a great way to incorporate, like, the name of the piece and the piece, they kind of play off each other. And that's what I ultimately set out to do. And that's what it's about.
And I really am struck by the use of the word we, right?
Yeah.
And so can you talk a little bit more about this collaborative process between you and for want of a better word, between you and your models?
Yeah, my models, my muse. Um yeah, it's honestly, I have ideas that I want them to do, but it's their body. And I throw out words or phrases or ideas, and they just kind of go with it. And these are not professional actors or anything like that. They're just normal people who have decided to take time out of their day to be a part of my project. And I do say we because it is a collaborative, um it's a collaborative project. I wouldn't be able to do it without them, and I wouldn't want to. And it's also, you want to get people's permission, and I could draw anyone, but this is a more collaborative and very intimate process. And so, yeah, I say we because it's not just me. It's them. It's also the people who have inspired my ideas. I take everyone with me. you know, that's I
Right,
guess that's why
right.
I feel. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Let's go to the next image.
Okay. Yeah, this is Countenance number 10. I did this series. There's about 12 or 13 of these. I can't remember exactly, but I was curious. I was challenging myself. I wanted to. So in my process, I stain large sheets of watercolor paper, and I have so many
Okay.
of them. So many of them. And they're all these different colors. And I said, I think I don't know exactly how many of these I stained, but I stained a lot of them. And I said, I wonder if I can create different nationalities, skin tones, and men and women using the same set amount of paper. So there's a series of, I think it's 12 of these, I believe, but all of them are cut from the same paper, even though they're different nationalities, different skin tones, different lighting, different, kind of the same color with the outfits. But I challenged myself to see if I could do that, use the same skin tone with all of the national, with just different types of people, and I succeeded, and I was
Hmm.
very pleased. It was like an experiment, and it was a portrait study on countenance, facial expressions. Um, I think this was my first time ever even creating a piece of a man with a beard. And, I
Mm.
think I was afraid of it because I'm like, "Oh my gosh, how is this gonna look?" And I try to shy away from too much hair because like I said, it can be such a distraction, and it's not my strong suit, but but I think it came out pretty well.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very striking image, and there's so much humanity in his eyes. So much about a portrait does come down to proportions, but it also
Mhm.
comes down to capturing something that is hard to describe with words.
Yeah,
And for me, like one of the artists that struck me early on in my sort of interest in art, and this is going back, at least 20 plus years ago,
mhm,
were sort of post-war British painters like Lucian Freud, Francis Bacon, right? And there are a host of others, and you know, there's nothing terribly original about being inspired by Lucian Freud or Francis Bacon. But
right.
I point out Lucian Freud in particular because his ability to mimic human flesh with oil paint and his ability to capture um, beauty in the what's the best word to use, in ways that are not necessarily the sort of typical ways of seeing beauty. And it kind of reminds me, I think about that when I see some of your other works where you're showing men and women's bodies that aren't necessarily this sort of like Western or European ideal of what the beauty or the best body is and all of those things, but that's real. Like that's just like
Yeah,
it's real, 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 right? Um, and I look at this work here, and you mentioned, oh, I try to stay away from hair, and maybe I'm not that like, good at it, but it's actually such a significant reason why this work resonates. I think between the
yeah,
eyes and the hair, there's something there that is so familiar.
yeah.
Like I think everyone has seen this man somewhere before, right? In some time in your life, whether it's on the train or on the bus or
Yeah.
or on the street, we've all seen this man somewhere before, right? Like there's a
And
familiarity.
you probably have because it's my friend Byron, and he's literally everywhere. So he's
So let's
literally
go. Let's go into the next image.
okay. Oh, yes. So this is I'm experimenting. After a while, you do so many portraits, you're like, I need a little break. Like, what can I do? How can I convey the exact same emotion that I want without showing a face?
Right.
And something about ribbed sweaters, ribbed, like that texture, I love it. I'm very attracted to it. And I thought, well, if I can find like a blanket, put it over a person, because I was thinking about like, some when you're deeply hurt by something or upset, and you just kind of like put the covers over your head. For some reason that image just kind of came in my mind, and I thought I want to recreate that. And so I created this series called Yesterday Was Hard, and I decided to name these Was Hard. There's three of them. And I want to create more of these, and it's just I really love the simplicity of words and phrases that we all can relate to. And I think
Mm.
everyone has said yesterday was hard. And I just feel like it's so simple, but it's so strong, you know?
Hmm.
And I think it's just something I'm really trying to find this like common thing with humanity in my artwork that we can all relate to no matter who you are. So I want to create more of these, maybe like more fuller body ones. Um, because I just love them so much. I think there's this feeling I get when I see the image that I wanna create. It's this feeling of like, "Yes, this is correct." And it feels very it just feels so right, and I know that I'm gonna go in this direction. And I don't know
Hmm.
what it is, it's like this moment of this person is not acting, this person doesn't realize I'm in the room, this person is sinking into the feeling that I'm trying to convey. It feels very honest, and
Yeah.
that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, that's really important. That's really important. I mean, how much trial and error goes into posing these individuals? Is it sort of like you know it when you see it, or have you kind of gone down certain paths and you're like, oh, this isn't quite right. It's not quite what I'm looking to do, even though I've started working on the piece. Like, have you had those kinds of challenges?
Yeah, I have had those challenges. I take thousands of photographs of the work, and I see thousands of photographs, and then I sometimes there's like a gesture that I like, but then I like the way the head is in another picture. So sometimes I can combine the images. I'm able to do that. Um, I actually have to do that more often than I'd like. Um, but it's oh, I forgot the question. I
Well, it's
completely
just
forgot.
about trial and error, and more about your process. Yeah.
Yeah, it is trial and error, especially with the sometimes the materials. I actually did this like 2 or 3 times. I had to keep starting over because I just couldn't get it right for whatever reason. It was like the skin was blending with the reddish um the reddish stripes, and
Hmm.
you know
Hmm.
you just have to be very careful, and there's a lot of like you have to do certain parts before you do another part, but then simultaneously doing something else, and sometimes it can just be really frustrating, and so I have to break them up. And sometimes the pieces intimidate me. They very much intimidate me. I'm like, oh my gosh, how can I am I gonna like, is it gonna look fake? Is it like I've definitely tried to get away with things where I'm just like, there's no way I'm gonna get away with this. Someone's gonna see it. It's too dark on this side. It's too light on that side. Um, and I have I actually number 3 is yesterday was hard number 3. I made a couple of mistakes.
Mm.
And I actually throw it away, but the more I sat with it, I thought, well, let's just see if anybody notices. You know what I mean? So yeah, there's
Right.
quite a lot of trial and error. Because that paper, it's thick, but it's you just have to you have to know what you're doing. And I
Right.
know what I'm
Right.
doing, but sometimes I surprise myself by not knowing what I'm doing.
Right.
So yeah.
Let's go to the next one.
Okay. Yeah,
So
so
this is
this one,
quite different from what we've seen.
yeah. This is called Our Mutual Friend, and I was actually asked to create this for an event in Paris. I think it was like the theme of an art fair or something, and I thought I'll take a shot at it. Sure, and it was about Parisian life. And spending some time in Paris and also just in Europe in general, I saw that there was this common theme with living spaces and how everyone was very communal, and most people were always outside, having tea or coffee with friends, smoking cigarettes. And I never really saw anyone alone, no matter where I was, whether I was in Italy or, Barcelona or even Portugal. It just seemed like, and I'm sure there were people who ate alone, but it just seemed like it was just more common to eat with friends or be with friends. Or I didn't see a lot of people by themselves, which is something that I'm very much, used to here in America. You see people by themselves all the time. And myself, I like to be alone. I like to do things alone. I like to have my alone time. Um, so I just started thinking about, well, living quarters and how I see again, I wanted to be an architect at one time, so I do appreciate interior design and just, like beautiful buildings. But I thought about seeing some people's living quarters in all those places. I thought about, wow, this home, this room looks like a room from my grandmother's house in the South, or from my father's
Mm.
house, or, just all these different places are in West Africa. I visited West Africa. I used to go there every summer when I was a little girl, and specifically in Ghana and also in Ethiopia. And so, like, I just thought about something that ties us all together. And I thought about this like little tiny part of a room, like not the full room, but just like the parts that we all will probably use. And
Hmm.
that's kinda how I came up with this idea. I wanted it
That's
to feel
great.
very
That's great.
familiar. Mhm.
That's great. I think we have two or three images left. Let's go to the next image in the interest of time. And I have definitely have several follow-up questions. But yeah, this is a
Yeah.
work that I think I was kind of referencing a few minutes ago in terms of the body and in terms of like, mimicking human flesh and how important that is in terms of a piece feeling authentic.
Yeah, so this is Felina number 2, and it's a part of 5, 5 different, pieces. It's a part of my, a big romance series, and, it was really inspired that whole series was inspired by a friend who was having some issues with her body. She didn't like the way she looked. She even said to me, "Do you think I like being in this body?" And that actually broke my heart because I feel like what's conventional beauty is actually unconventional, and what's unconventional is actually conventional because,
Hmm.
uh, that's just what I've seen in my life. Like, I don't know, I don't walk around seeing supermodels all day long or Ken dolls all day long. I see normal, regular people, and that's what interests me the most. And, I wanted to create women who are quote unquote unconventional, but they're actually conventional. Um,
Hmm.
so but these women they're so proud, and there's just like this resilience, and there's just this feeling of this is who I am. I'm very beautiful and I'm proud of it, and it is what it is. And I love that, and I wanted to capture that because I find it to be very beautiful. And I wanted to show other people how beautiful it is. And I love these works, honestly. Like, I wish I could have kept some of them, but I wasn't able to do that. So this is this is from a big romance, and a big romance is this just expression of self-love. Romance, we
Right.
think about it, two people, but it's really, to me, the first romance we should experience is the romance that we have with ourselves.
Right, right.
That's
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So we're coming down to our final 10 minutes. Let's get to the final couple of slides. And I definitely want to get in a few more questions before we wrap up today.
yeah.
So walk me through this work and the next, and then I have a few follow-up questions.
Yeah, so this one is part of my Untitled Flower series, and basically, I a lot of things that I do in my life trigger memories. So one day, someone had given me this really beautiful bouquet of flowers. It was curated. It was nice. I set it on the kitchen table, and something about it just felt very dry. And so I decided I want to go outside and pick weeds. So I picked some weeds, dandelions, all kinds of things, and I put them on the kitchen like island, and I thought I enjoyed them. I enjoyed them actually more than I enjoyed this curated bouquet of flowers that someone had given me. Um, and then it just reminded me of my grandmother and how she would always repurpose things. She was known for repurposing things. She knew how to make life sparkle. And I remember us doing these things, and I thought it was luxurious when we would go to her house and and pick weeds, and I was like, "Wow, this is luxury." Like, I didn't know anything about scarcity, and I still don't, I guess, because I don't care. I really love the weeds, and I loved how they, kind of die a little bit, and I wanted to capture that. It was kind of like a tribute to my grandmother and the way she
Mm.
would sort of decorate her home with these found things, like these random jars, and I used the Blue Magic container because I just thought it would add just a little bit more context, you know?
Mm.
So yeah,
Mm.
so it's kind of a
Yeah,
tribute to my grandmother. Mhm.
thanks for sharing that. It's quite a different from the works that we've seen before this. Let's go to the next.
Yeah. Jacqueline, she is also a part of the Big Romance series, and she's, just another one of the 5 women that I decided to create. These actually showed first in Paris, and they were very well received. And this was so much fun because her undertones were full of purples and browns and like burnt sienna and all these beautiful oranges and reds, and it was so much fun to create like the shadows within the portrait, um, and just also just like really get use a lot of purple to like to mimic her skin. It was fun to work with on this one. And then like her hair and her facial expression. Um, yeah, I really enjoyed this one.
Well, not everyone would be willing to pose for a nude portrait. What's that process like? What kind of conversations are you having with folks that leads them to being so comfortable?
I think it's just being in LA because I
Mm,
think people they just understand art and what it takes. And I most people don't they're willing, And I have asked when I was working in Houston for a while. I did ask a few people, and they were a little bit more reserved. And I do think that it's location. I think maybe in New York I would have experienced the same thing. People just being a little bit more open. Um, but yeah, I think once I showed them, my idea and I approach it, I'm honest about it, and they've seen the work. I think they're open to posing, and I think that they know that I'm going to do a good job of depicting them in a very classy way. I hope so.
yeah,
I hope.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's definitely an art
Yeah.
in and of itself, communicating with people. So this work is quite a departure from everything we've seen. So
Yeah.
curious to hear more about it.
Yeah, so I am kind of going more into abstract work. I'm never going to abandon what I'm doing because I absolutely love it. But there are some ideas that I can't express in the figurative that I can in the abstract. And one of them is this. It's this I've had this idea for probably well over 10 years. And so there are 70 red squares, and one of them is different. And it has a speck, and it's called the speck. So that little white speck represents our perceived imperfections, like the things that we carry that we think are so wrong with us. Or maybe it's something that we think people see when they see us. But up close, it's a big deal. But if you zoom out, you'll see that it's so small and insignificant. But at the same time, if it wasn't there, there wouldn't be anything to inquire about. So that's that's that idea, and I can't express that in the figurative. So the spec is just really about our perceived imperfections and how, if you take the view of a 99-year-old person in the grand scheme of your life, that thing that you're obsessing over is really not that big of a deal.
Well, that's wisdom, right? That's
Yeah.
real wisdom. Well, I'm very happy we were able to look at examples of your work, and for others who have joined us today who haven't seen the work, I mean, certainly I would just say go online, do some digging. There's some fantastic images out there, and hopefully they'll be able to see some of the work in person, especially if they're in Charlotte. They can go to the Gantt Center. So we can stop the slideshow. We're down to the final few minutes. So here are a couple other things I wanted to talk about. So you mentioned travel, and that's something that for me is always really exciting. I travel quite a lot. But you mentioned parts of Africa, you mentioned parts of Europe, etc. So, but you're in LA. So, talk about being in LA. Like, what's it like to be an artist in LA right now?
Oh, it's exciting. It's even more exciting when I can leave my studio, which I'm doing that a lot more. I'm getting out because you have to experience the world. That's very important. It's a little scary too, but things have settled down, and you know, there's just more ideas to explore and more to create, and that's the most exciting thing. And LA, we have a very strong community. So that's what I love about LA. It's all these artists there that are just excited to work, just excited to
Mm,
create. So it makes it so easy to have access to all these wonderful people who want your project to succeed, and then you want their project to succeed. It's fabulous. That's why I'm never leaving.
So, final question: what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to, gosh, just more opportunities. I'm looking forward to collaborating with other artists. I'm looking forward to I'm looking forward to completely emptying my creativity. Like whatever is inside of me that needs to come out, I just want it out. And I want to continue, whether that's through music, through writing, through artwork, through film, anything that finds its way to me, I want to get these ideas out. And I'm just excited to wake up, to be able to wake up and create every day.
That's fantastic. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I really appreciate your participation in this conversation. It's been fun and enlightening for me. I have some final words that I usually read at the conclusion of these open airs, but I didn't want to abruptly just kind of like stop you. So, is there anything you'd like to share before we conclude today?
No, just if you can, visit the Gantt.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, your show's on view there until the middle of May, so folks should certainly, make the trip and see the show. Congratulations on that as well. So now on to my final words. The Gantt Center's goal is always to provide programs that inform and inspire. The support of viewers like you allows the Gantt Center to expand its reach and further develop programs like today's open air. You can lend your support to the Gantt Center by texting "Give to Gantt" to the number 91999. Also, be sure to like and subscribe to this channel for future programs and other video content updates. I want to thank you for joining us for today's conversation, and I'm really looking forward to next month's open air with artist Khalif Tahir Thompson. Everyone have a safe and wonderful evening, and again, thank you very much. Good night.